Welcome back to this beautiful sunny Monday morning on Crypt. Oh my God, we had an amazing weekend. Bitcoin performed well. I like to read into that as a positive. Usually the weekends are a funky monkey situation. We don't have the traditional finance players. We don't have a lot of the liquidity flowing through it. So it's always nice to see some positive outcomes on a weekend. Now, at the same time, we have Robinhood coming out today announcing more about stocks on chain and this traditional finance overlap. And we're seeing this confluence of assets that I've been talking about. The same way we saw the data explosion with the internet and the way that everything informational kind of blended into this new fluid, frictionless environment, we're seeing the same thing with value. A lot of people in the cryptocurrency industry like to talk about how, hey, these things like ETH is money, but it's in my opinion that we are actually destroying the concept of money. It doesn't get to stick in this one banknote, in this one location. We are fragmenting it. Now, anywhere that you earn attention, in the same way the attention economy works on the internet, that attention can be converted to value. And all of these value sets are flowing into the same applications, whether they be Robinhood, whether they be Ethereum or Solana on chain. But that being said, we can earn our bucks inside of a video game, and we can use that to buy assets that we can put against a house mortgage. All of this is beginning to happen. And let's remember, the internet went through the same sort of experimentational phase with information itself. When the first email was sent, the story goes that someone in the room said, oh, cool, you can send a message to a very specific server, but the United States Postal Service can send that message anywhere. Well, look at where we're at now. So anyway, I've been talking a lot about regulations, the SEC, how we're moving forward to building bigger and better businesses alongside the Trump grift that continues to sort of disrupt the perception of our industry and the things that are being built, and of course the great stablecoin explosion. But today I want to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, because when people say, why crypto? What has it actually done? Are there any use cases out there? I always come back to decentralized storage. This is something that I think is so important. We are finding our data sets just exploited far too often. Know your client turning more into kill your client. Again, Meta, OpenAI, they're building these profiles on who we are, on what we look at, on what we watch, what we buy. I mean, we look at China in the US and we say, oh, but they're a surveillance state from the government level. Well, we're a surveillance state from the private company level. I guess the difference is we can invest in the shares, whereas they sort of invest in their own society. And which one's a better solution? I honestly don't know at this point. But the reality is I do not love these data profiles being stored in these honeypots, because time and time again, we see them getting exploited, whether that be my genetic data on 23andMe or the Social Security, or all of our emails that lead to this massive amount of spam that everyone lives with day to day. So decentralized storage, it's not something new. It's something that's been around since the early ICO era of 2017, but it is having a heyday. There are really big competitors coming in, and they're coming in recently, and we can tell that the game is stepping up. So today I want to get into 3 products that I've been paying attention to just from a personal level, which is Swee's Walrus platform, Aptos's Shelby, and Zero Gravity, their operating system of AI, and how they're looking at decentralized storage as well. So let's hop right into that. Now, I want to note I'm not bringing these up in like a chronological order. I'm picking them off one by one. There are more solutions than these 3, but people that I know that are building AI apps that need that storage to live somewhere, people in the application world, they're looking like, hey, if we're going to do a video streaming app, if we're going to do a YouTube, like where does the background data live? And the idea just fundamentally is that we take a distributed network, right? A bunch of nodes all around the world, and we give them each a tiny bit of our data. So if one of those nodes gets exploited for whatever reason, there's not a full data set to pull back, right? Let's say I write my grocery list and I distribute it across the world, and I need 5 items. They might only pick out 1 item, and it won't let them know what I'm cooking, right? That's the idea. Let's just like open it up to bigger concepts. Now, Sui and Aptos are coming from arguably one of the best distributed system engineering platforms in the world, which would be Facebook, Meta. Their platform, their social media, their WhatsApp, their Instagram, these are massive systems that are always online, and they are catering to hundreds of millions of users globally speaking. Now, both Aptos and Sui did spin out of Facebook. Facebook had a crypto project back in like 2019, 2020 called Libra, ultimately Diem. It was a collective of companies that were going to essentially accept digital monies. Let's just call it a stablecoin. Now, the government at that time said, hell no, bro, that's way too powerful. Now, that caused Zuck to pivot more towards the metaverse, look more into AI, where he stands right now. And of course, they are considering a stablecoin play to integrate into WhatsApp. Now that we see that stablecoins are legit, that they go cross-border, that they're 24/7, 365, and that they're virtually free to send money, because again, data and money are the same thing. So we get into Swee's Walrus, their standalone product for decentralized data storage. And one thing that's important to understand, data storage is really broken into two major parts that just at a high level, read and write. Now, read is something that we're familiar with because we're all doing it right now. We're pulling that information, we're reading it from the book on this video streaming format. Read is extremely crucial to things like conference calls, right? When we get on Google Meet, when we're pulling data actively, when we're inferencing with AI, right? It is hot, it is on, there's a pull of information, a stream directly into our face of data from a server. Write, we can think of as long-term storage. You plug in a hard drive, you drag a file onto it, you write to that drive, you put it into cold storage, and you say, yeah, that's my backup, right? If my computer goes down, if it crashes, I have a backup for that. So these are the major competing points, and Walrus comes out and is like very much on the right side. They're making it very cheap for you to store your data. It could be large AI training sets. It could be all of the information behind your website, and it is being held in something called a blob. Now, a blob on chain sits in the data availability layer. If you know, like Celestia, we call it DA. Ethereum operates on Ethereum DA, but they are all sitting in blobs, saying that your images, your videos, your documents, we put those into what are called blobs. Blobs sit on these nodes, and if a node gets exploited, you only get a piece of the information that's sitting in that big blob. But a blob takes data and it throws it into the blob, right? And that's the idea, and that sits on the data availability layer. So Walrus is very focused at blob, writing your data, writing your information, writing your images, keeping all of your memories. And it's cheap, and it's distributed, and it's safe. And that's the core concept. And one thing about it is that it operates on Sui. Sui is built on the Move language that came out of Facebook, which tries to say, hey, when you program with Move, you're basically taking Lego blocks that are pre-approved. You're stacking them together so an application, activates those Lego blocks in a sequence. One of the reasons Ethereum is often exploited, or especially in the earlier days, is that it is in a language that uses a very difficult syntax, right? The way that the coding is phrased was actually open to other intelligent programmers to exploit. And it's not that they didn't hack it, they didn't break the code, they just said the way you wrote it could be exploited by somebody who has a different interpretation. Now, Move is supposed to be heavier. There's not as much about syntax, it's about putting these Lego blocks together, and in that way, they're supposed to be safer. So what we're looking at with Walrus is that it is cheap to store your information. It is distributed so that if it's safe, right? Like you can't get the full data set by hacking any one of these nodes. And it is also anti-fragile on a programming language level. So you have that safety of the Move language and just the way that applications are written when they support this. Now, one thing they're going for is to be chain agnostic. They're saying it doesn't really matter if you're on the Sui network or not. That's going to be the back end of this data set, but you can pull that data from all over the place. And while this wasn't the first of these programs to come out, they were looking at Filecoin on the EVM, and they were saying, hey, we need a better, faster, cheaper, secure method for it. So that's Sui's Walrus, and just think of it as a giant hard drive in the sky that's fairly cheap to access, that's super redundantly copied. What is it called? Red Pass or something. Basically means that even if 66% of the nodes, well over the 51% threshold, get exploited, get revealed, your data does remain safe. I think it backs up everything about 5 to 6 times effectively through its sharding in the various blobs. Now, then we have Aptos coming out, and they're like, whoo, we also want to get in the game where others store Shelby serves. And this is sort of the crux of the differentiator. Remember, Walrus is really focused on write. The difference being Shelby is on read. So the prices are sort of inverted. And that might be the easiest way to think about the differences between these two products. Whereas Walrus is cheap to write your data and to store it long term, it gets to be more expensive on the recall, on the read. Now, it's a little more expensive on Shelby to store your data, to write to it, but it becomes extremely cheap to read. So like, let's think of why we would want to do one or the other. If it's cheap to store data, you can just store a lot of data. But if it's expensive to read it, maybe you don't need to read it very often. You're like, fuck it, just store it on there because we're not pulling it back up all that often. However, if you're like me, if you want to stream your video, if I'm building an application that's got real-time communication like web video chat, well, then I need that read to be pretty cheap because it's going to be the primary use case. So I'll store less things because I'm paying more on the storage, but I know that those things are going to be pulled up and activated a lot more often. I'm going to be saving so much money on the read side that I'm willing to spend more on the write side. And that is what they're looking at. And they call it the first decentralized hot storage network being built on a dedicated fiber network. And the dedicated fiber network is also part of this. In the same way 00 is taking these giant nodes and connecting them to host the internet, that's basically what they're saying here. They're going to have a dedicated fiber network between these large node clusters, and they are decentralized. Various people can operate them, but there is a speed guarantee because these nodes, these storage nodes, are communicating in this kind of inner circle layer, very akin to 00. But the focus here is going to be on active elements, these hot storage requirements, again, designed for streaming, AI inference. And remember, it might be better to store a training set on cheaper write data because a training set is a ton of information, but it's fairly static. How is this thing trained? But the inference, that's when you're talking to the AI. That's the active communication with the brain pulling from that training data set and creating new information based off that. Real-time apps, fast like Web 2, open like Web 3. So really interesting stuff here. Storage at scale, hot storage at scale, chain agnostic deployment. Again, they don't want to just target Aptos, dedicated fiber network, real incentivized monetization. And this really refers to the cheaper payments for read data. And they're basically looking at if you're getting read data accessed a lot, you're basically a highly utilized app. So there is an economic incentive to be read a lot, right? To be used. And I think that makes a lot of sense, straightforward. Data integrity and built-in resilience. I mean, this kind of goes across all the platforms. But Shelby is the value creation engine that Web3 has been waiting for. And of course, we have these beautiful brands. And if you guys want to get deep, read the white papers. They're not that crazy. They're pretty straightforward. And they're not too difficult to hop into. Now, one thing I do think stands out about Shelby is that we have this wild team, Jump Crypto, who has a very deep history in market making the industry. They were very much the primary liquidity providers of the 2020 cycle. They got a little bit hit when FTX blew up, but they're also the team behind FireDancer, the latest and greatest in hyper nodes for the Solana chain. FireDancer is making Solana so much faster. It's ridiculous. They're also behind Pyth, which is an Oracle network on Solana. And they just, let's sum it up, they build great shit and they're very powerful on the financial liquidity side. So not only are they like a financial firm, but they're also a technical firm, and that puts them in a very powerful position. And when I say financial, I really mean high frequency trading. They're the kind of guys that would like move a mountain to get a line of sight on a laser to clear. So Jump being a partner here, very bold, very powerful signal, and it should be interesting to see how Shelby competes. And of course, here's the white paper. I went through it just so I could get a better grip on all of this, but it is a fun read. And I think if you're curious, you should absolutely dive in because you will see, better flows of how all of the data is transacted. Now, last in this circle, we have 0G. And I like these guys. I put in an angel check because their team was very strong. They're coming out of the Amazon background. They've got BlackRock backgrounds involved. Their team is just very stacked, as we would say. And their concept is creating an operating system for AI. So they're also in this game of data availability. Obviously, the AI training sets need to be stored somewhere. The AI inferencing also needs to be pulled from somewhere. And their goal is that all of this sort of interacts in a more AI-friendly way, an agentic way. So they're looking less at, hey, you're building an app and you want to store data, you want to pull data, as in you're building an app with an agent at the core of it. And this agent needs to be able to interact between all of these things in a very fluent and AI-first way. So they're also looking at this as infinitely scalable, right? Basically trying to make Web3 come off as Web 2, fully on-chain, a high, which does mean that our interactions with these AIs are self-sovereign, that maybe we even have ownership over this agent, because at the end of the day, if we're going to be telling them everything about ourselves, we might want to have this behind a private key that we store versus putting it up for, again, a honeypot of data that somebody can go exploit from a company. And we've seen that time and time again. Seamless composability, and this is important in the AI world, which just means if someone builds one app, it is immediately interoperable with another app. So if you build product A, product B could like leverage it, it could yield it, it could use it to create a bigger, bolder product B. And this is Zero Gravity's modular DAIOS, Decentralized AI Operating System. And they've got their own way in which it works: service marketplace, apps, alignment nodes, compute network, right? The AI actually needs a energy. I guess compute would be more the heart than the brain. Data availability, which would be the memory. And of course, the chain, which is doing consensus. Storage at the bottom, let's call that also brain kind of element as well. And deep in hardware is actually the hardware that supports all of this. So they're getting pretty deep in their stack of how they're building all of this. And that is the differentiator. Again, they have a very nice website here that really does provide a lot of detail. You can hop into their white paper, but I mean, this website's pretty deep on it all. So that's a really great opportunity. Just to sum it up, I had ChatGPT make me this chart really quickly. And when we look at it, right, these are kind of similar words for the same thing, so I do hope to clarify it here, but we have Walrus, Shelby, Zero Gravity, and primary use case for Walrus would be, again, writing, blob storage, putting in your media, your AI data, your NFTs, your ownership stats, and just making sure that, again, an NFT doesn't exist if it sits on a centralized server. All they have to do is delete it, and you own the coin with the pointer to the server, but the server no longer has anything. So if we put the art on decentralized storage, it lives forever along with the coin that's in your wallet that points to the art. Now, Shelby, looking more for real-time hot data, streams, AI feeds, things coming at your face. We can think of it as going away or coming, right? Redshift versus blue shift. Zero Gravity is on-chain AI workloads, so data compute. I think these are all really interesting differentiated services that you can see provide a very clear use case. And it's going to be fun to watch them compete and see what apps build on top of them. Blockchain integration, we have Sui Move native, on-chain blobs, Shelby being much more chain agnostic, Aptos, Ethereum, Solana. That might be a killer edge. Zero Gravity is a modular L1, DA tied to Ethereum L1. So they're putting a bet in with the EVM, but this could always expand. That's sort of what the modular L1 optionality is for. Again, Lego blocks, storage model, red stuff, ensure coded replicas. This gets to be a little bit deeper just on like, how is it sharded? How is this information scattered across the network itself, or the nodes, I should say, not the network as much. CDN style caching over fiber mesh. So this fiber mesh is a little bit more proprietary on the hardware side, but it also guarantees speed, right? And that's going to be very important. Partition lanes within scaling DA. I mean, we're kind of getting to different ways of saying similar things. Data access speed, high throughput and caching, sub-second reads, hot storage, focused data availability, compute latency as needed. Now, incentives is going to be a very competitive way, right? The economics is a big part of blockchain world. So we have Walrus staking and challenges. You can basically challenge something, but we haven't really seen challenges and slashing take off. Eigenlayer has finally got slashing live. It's starting to show that maybe it can be something, but at scale, I mean, proof of stake networks, they rarely slash anybody for their stake. It's one of my concerns that they actually become a power grab and a consolidation around who has the majority of the assets, but we shall see how that works. Now, conversely, on Shelby, you've got rewards for nodes serving reads usage. So if your node is hosting an app that has a lot of use, it's pulling up this web stream over and over again, you're going to receive increased rewards. That is a good incentive for you to want to host data that gets pulled very often, that gets used, right? We want to see revenue, we want to see utilization, and this is an interesting take. We have validator staking and proof-based data availability integrity. This is sort of the same as Walrus staking and challenges. So maybe Shelby really does stand alone on its economic incentives. Now you have your security, your performance claim, your best application fit, whatever. They've kind of covered those things, but this is a pretty simple overlap. I mean, anyone can bang these into ChatGPT and get an output. So, use it. Be curious. I incentivize you to question everything I say against the AIs. Of course, we have Binance coming in with Greenfield. I'm less interested in it, to be honest, because it's coming from Binance. It's not coming from these amazing Web2 teams that have a really firm grip on how these decentralized storage networks work. But of course, Binance has a lot of money. They can hire good talent, and we'll see how they come into play. This will also interact with the BNB chain, which is just, it's hot fire. It's economically working well. And when coin goes up, it does reinforce people's desire to build on top of you because, again, they're going to denominate in that ecosystem in any way, shape, or form. They want to get paid for their efforts, and there's always something to that. But I am really fascinated by, again, Walrus, Shelby, zero gravity, and these are things that have a clear use case. We're looking at the backbone of the entire internet without the meta overlord. And we can see a lot of the responses and the negativity towards crypto and the regulatory landscape was the fact that these sort of Silicon Valley oligarchs came out of nowhere. They blindsided Washington, and you had these billionaires with these extremely powerful, prominent networks becoming sort of a threat to the governance of society. That's a lot of what motivated Elizabeth Warren to go after crypto for the full kill, right? They went straight for the throat right out of the gate. I think that was a major mistake. I always have. I think that the stable coins are the United States' greatest way to stay on top as a financial asset, right? To distribute the US dollar globally and to make sure that people still want it and use it, especially against the rising yuan. But that is sort of the rationale why. And we don't really want these profiles to be made. That Amazon pre-buy, if you remember when they came out, where we just order things before you did because they know so much about us. They've got this precognition. This is only going to grow increasingly large with OpenAI as people talk more to ChatGPT. They put in their personal information. As we get agentic AI that is plugged into our calendar, that is watching what we eat so that we can have a caloric tracking. We don't want these profiles that are going to be so fucking robust to be sitting again with these oligarchs. We want them on distributed networks that require a private key that sits in our self-sovereign custody so that we can control it. I do want to have an AI help me with my health, with my wealth. I don't want somebody else to be able to tap into that data set and look at, oh, Graham is doing XYZ. He's going to be at this location. That gets very dangerous. That gets very disconcerting. And that gets very dystopian. So hopefully this was a high level dive into something I find to be really fascinating, and it scratches a little itch on your brain. If I'm wrong about anything, any of these teams, by all means, hop in my comments, make me aware of it. I would love to clarify, to correct, or to have a conversation directly with any of the people building, because I do speak to a lot of application developers, and I'm kind of curious where they should be going. I don't fully know. But that being said, this is a hard and clear use case for blockchains, for cryptocurrencies. And when anyone says why crypto, well, tell them to fuck right off and go research these projects themselves. With that being said, good luck, stay safe out there, don't over leverage, and I'll see you tomorrow.